What is up, sports fans? First and foremost, before we get started on this NFL Whip Around podcast, I want to talk about, if you're watching on YouTube, to like and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that. You want to follow Fans First Sports Network for all the latest sports news and videos. You don't want to miss it, so like and subscribe. Also, if you're listening to this in the audio form at Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating. We do appreciate it because it does help. I am Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Coach, what's going on?
What's up, Jeff? I thought you were going to say, first of all, you wanted to talk about the eclipse.
Well,
that was how we were leading the show.
I'm excited that you and I weren't taken off in the rapture like, some other people, I guess, were.
There were some doomsday preppers that were pretty excited about this event.
Yeah, they might be disappointed. I don't know. I don't know how to view it. But anyways, we are here. We made it, and we're here to talk about another week of NFL news and all this stuff, as we really have reached the lull right before we start to ramp up for the NFL draft. This is when free agency really starts to quiet down. A lot of the players are just going to wait it out now. They're not going to sign right now. Why would they sign right now? Wait till after the draft. A team that might need a safety, and they didn't get a safety, so now they need to go and find one that's still on the market. So, all right, let's start off, though. We have our 5 topics, as we always do. Start off talking about the situation in Kansas City. It's related to the NFL, but we're going to talk about it anyways because it is a talking point. It's the fact that the people in that area rejected a ballot initiative for taxes to be used to benefit the Kansas City Royals, Major League Baseball, and the Kansas City Chiefs to have renovations or a new stadium built. Now, this is prompting the mayor of Dallas, Texas, to lobby for the Chiefs to leave Kansas City and return back to where they actually started. A lot of people probably don't know that the Chiefs were actually in Dallas at one point. The owner of the Chiefs, Clark Hunt, lives in Dallas and is the son of Lamar Hunt, who founded the original Dallas team. So before we go to any chance of this Chiefs to Dallas thing happening, I want to ask you, what do you think about local areas using taxpayer dollars to fund new stadium builds, renovations, or things like that?
Not a fan. I'm not a fan. It's public taxpayer money funding a private entity. And if you did that in another aspect, let's say that you decided that you had a Ford Motor plant in your area that employed a lot of people and was important to the area, but then you asked the local taxpayers to foot the bill for some of the expenses of running the motor plant there. I think there'd be a big outcry over public dollars going into private pockets. And, that's really what the situation is. I get why people do it because they're passionate about their sports teams and they want to keep them. But from a principled standpoint, it doesn't seem like the right move. And then plus, like, these owners, they're billionaires, man. I'm not saying that they should foot the bill themselves, but when you get into the business of investing in a company, you're generally responsible for the welfare of that company, especially if you're a billionaire.
Yeah, I think about, we're obviously Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Anyone that listens to this podcast knows that. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, while the Rooney family, they always say, oh, the owners, they are the majority owner. They own, I think, 51% of the team. And then the other 49% is minority ownership. And Tull is one of them. But who's the owner of the Panthers now? His name is escaping my brain. He used to be a minority owner of the Steelers. So you know how much money these people, even the minority owners, have in terms of their overall net worth. They get through this with this guise of like public facility structures. And they'll say like, well, it's not just going to be used for sports. We'll have concerts that are going to help the local economy. And we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And we'll have this marathon there or whatever. They use all of that for reasons to just take tax dollars and have it help them and not have the billionaires front the bill for it. I agree with you. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, and I'm not going to go into a spiel about taxation and all this stuff in our country and how crooked it is already. But I was, hey, the Kansas City people that live there, they have every right to vote no. They have every right to say, you know what? I love the Chiefs and I love the Royals. I support the Royals, even though they've had more bad years than good in the last 20. But I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay with me and my tax dollars going somewhere, which we have very little say in what happens with our tax dollars anywhere. So in this case, them saying no, I'm totally fine with it. So without going down the rabbit hole of taxation without representation and all that stuff, which is a fallacy in our country anymore, let's talk about whether you think that I'll leave you with that. So let's talk about, do you think that connection of the Chiefs actually leaving Kansas City is real?
No. One thing to add to that real quick. I read an article the other day about this topic, and the author was talking about how shocked that they were that this was voted down. And I'm like, this is Missouri, man. I mean, it's a red state. I mean, this is a red state. This is not a state where they just, take kindly to taxation.
Yeah.
So that's not surprising to me. As to whether or not they'll actually leave, well, first of all, they got a lease at Arrowhead until 2031, so they're not leaving anytime soon. But it would I be surprised if they left? Yes. Would I be shocked? No, because we've seen it now. We've seen it with the A's and the Raiders, and you obviously have examples of the Rams going back and forth from LA to St. Louis, etc. The Chargers moving from San Diego to LA. I mean, there's plenty of examples of teams that leave. Now, none of those teams that I just mentioned have a connection, I think, with their fan base that the Chiefs have. Maybe actually probably an example that would be a little bit more of a parallel would be the Browns leaving for Baltimore, because there was a deep-rooted connection there. So while it would be surprising, it certainly wouldn't be shocking, because we've got plenty of examples.
What people need to realize, these owners don't really care. They care about money. Like, they only care about money. And people can say, well, the Rooney's are from Pittsburgh and all this stuff. You want to use that Steelers example because that's been the tried and true example for so many years. They care about money too. Like, that's what they care about the most. And so it's one of those things where I use the analogy of the Pittsburgh Penguins, who up until Mario Lemieux got a group of people together and said, we're going to buy the team, they were ready to leave. They were gone. And so you think about like the Pittsburgh Penguins, like that is a hockey town now. And it would be crazy to consider. But like you said, there've been a lot of examples of teams. You think about the Seattle Supersonics in the NBA. I mean, Sean Kemp and Gary Payton back in the day. I mean, they're not leaving, right? Yet they did. They left. You could talk about numerous examples in the NHL, whether you're talking about the Quebec Nordiques, the Hartford Whalers, all these different. I mean, my gosh, oh my gosh, some of these teams that have left Canada and gone to the dumbest places, like
the
Atlanta.
Montreal Expos left and became the Washington Nationals. There's lots of examples, right?
Yeah, so they don't care. They don't care about the fan base. They'll say that they care about the fan base, but they don't. And so I think in this situation, I don't think there's any way that they're going to leave. I do think it's important to note that they were not asking for a new stadium for Arrowhead. They were asking for upgrades. I don't know what those upgrades existed of. I didn't read about it, but still, it's interesting. It'll be something to keep an eye on. I'm sure the owners might have to front the bill if they want those upgrades and keep the team there. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. Any final thoughts on that?
Well, I just think the connection to Dallas is interesting. The Hunt family's roots are there. Clark Hunt lives there. If he wanted to make a sort of faux nostalgic argument that, hey, we're gonna return the team to their roots in Dallas, they could do it, and Dallas could support two football teams. The Cowboys are in Arlington, which is about 20 miles away, but the population of Dallas has boomed. That's now a city that ranks in the top 6. I believe it's the 6th biggest city now in America, population wise. And so, I mean, cities that have supported more than one team are doing well. And I think Dallas, with the population boom throughout the Sun Belt region in this country, that's a city that I think could handle it.
You know what would suck, though? If that were to happen, it would suck for the people in Missouri. The people that don't have a Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they probably in the fall and in the winter, they live and die for the Kansas City Chiefs. And someone to just take that away would just be awful. But again, they don't care. So keep that in mind. Let's go to the next topic. Staying in the state of Texas, what's your take on the big trade between the Texans and the Buffalo Bills, sending Stefon Diggs to the Texans for really 1 year? That's only 1 year. They negated the final years of his deal. It's a 2025 second-round pick. What were your thoughts on that?
Really interesting move, I think, on both parties. One, Houston, obviously in go-for-it mode. very, very quickly. Two years ago, the Texans went 3-13 and had one of the worst rosters in the NFL. Then they bring in a new coaching staff. They draft C.J. Stroud. They have a really nice season last year, and this offseason, they've just been stockpiling talent. So obviously the Texans feel like, they're ready to compete for a championship, because by voiding those couple of years of Diggs's contract, they're absolutely taking a huge gamble. I think obviously they're betting on him being successful this season and building chemistry with Stroud and wanting to come back, but clearly there's no guarantee. For Buffalo, they're clearing salary. I mean, they've lost a lot of talent. They lost their top two receivers, Diggs and Gabe Davis. I'm sure they'll replace one of those guys in the draft. But if you're Josh Allen, you kind of have to be like, what's going on, man? I mean, we've been right there for the last 3 or 4 years, and now all of a sudden it feels like they're reshuffling the deck. So I think that's an interesting move on both parties. One more comment real quick. I read that we were just talking about the Chiefs. I read that the Bills gave Stefon Diggs the ability to work out a trade with any team he wanted except Kansas City. They took Kansas City off the board and said, we will not trade you to the Chiefs. I thought that was interesting.
I didn't know that. That's news to me. That's interesting. Yeah. I think Stefon Diggs was a headache. And there's been reports now that have come out since he's left from reporters in the locker room that have they didn't report stories at the time based on the fact that, they didn't know how conducive that would be to them getting access to the team. Reporters have to weigh that. They have to walk that fine line. But the one thing is that I felt like Stefon Diggs was a headache there. Let me ask you this question, and this will help me phrase my next thought. True or false? We will find out how good Josh Allen is in 2024.
That's actually a really interesting question. I think we have a pretty good idea how good he is. It'll be interesting to see how much team success they can have with a new approach on offense. I mean, his security blanket was Diggs. He could always they ran a lot of isolation stuff where they'd get into 3-by-1 sets and they'd put Diggs on the backside and they would just say, I dare you to cover him one-on-one. So I don't know who they're going to draft to replace him. They don't pick until 28th in the first round. So it's not like they're going to get one of those elite receivers, but it's going to require a new approach on their part. I'll be really interested to see how they structure their offense now.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about some of the best quarterbacks of the modern era we're talking about since maybe 2000 and on, a lot of them have made some really okay receivers look really, really great. And so we'll see if Josh Allen is one of those guys, because when you lose a Stefon Diggs, and who's he going to throw the ball to? That's the question.
Big tight end game, man. They're going to.
Dalton Kincaid, here we go.
He's going to get a lot of get him on your fantasy team, man.
Exactly. It's interesting. When I first saw the trade, to give you just my knee-jerk reaction, I said, this doesn't make sense, until I found out that they got the final 3 years of the deal negated. And I was like, okay, now it's a 1-year rental. Now I could see why Diggs is going there. He has a chance to succeed, to get the bag one more time, as the guys say, and have a more long-term contract. It's a 1-year deal, essentially. So I get it. It just was odd. I thought it was odd timing. I agree with you. I'm not sure what the Bills are going to do. There's a lot of people thinking the Bills are going to trade up in the draft and try and get an elite wide receiver, which that's going to be an interesting dynamic moving forward. So any final thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I just feel as though Buffalo has to figure out a way to remake themselves quickly, because when you have a quarterback like a Josh Allen, right, I mean, he's still a young guy. His window is pretty big, but you don't want him to become disgruntled and now start to think about moving on. Obviously you want to remake yourself. You want to get rid of a headache, fine, but don't lose your franchise QB in the process.
Yeah, you got to keep the playmakers happy. That is for sure. Yeah. Let's go to our next topic. Former Steelers turned analyst Merrill Hodge. He said recently that the top quarterback prospect Drake Maye is, quote, the kind of player who will get you fired, end quote. What do you make of these comments, and would it give you pause drafting Maye? And I will say, Merrill Hodge, that is, he has been noted for calling some of these players well before the draft. There's a famous video that's out on Twitter. You can see it in myriad of places, where I think it was Johnny Manziel, when he said he would be a fool to take this guy. And you have Skip Bayless on there saying, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, Merrill Hodge kind of hit the nail on the head there. What's your take on his take of Drake Maye?
First of all, Skip Bayless. Can I just quickly, like, anybody that listens to Skip Bayless, right, needs to find something else to do. But Johnny Manziel, yeah, he was spot on about Manziel. You and I talked about the quarterbacks last week, the top guys, and I said that Drake Maye scared me. That he could be a boom or bust guy, because I think his ceiling is Josh Allen. That he's got this cannon of an arm and really mobile and this ability to make plays, but he's also got kind of some of that early career Brett Favre mentality where he just does stupid things. You watch what he does at North Carolina, and he gets away with plays in college that there's no way he gets away with in the NFL. And so, I think I said on the show last week, whoever drafts him really needs to manage him well, because if you kind of let him do what he did in college, he's going to get you in trouble. And I think that's what Merrill Hodge was alluding to, is that this guy's going to be a turnover machine, and turnovers lose ball games, and losing ball games get you fired. So I think he really needs to be managed carefully by whoever drafts him.
I'm not going to pretend like I know a ton about Drake Maye's game in college, but last week, when you said the Brett Favre comparison, especially early years, Brett Favre, I said, whoa, like that's not a calling card you want. You don't want the early Brett Favre career. And when I think about quarterbacks, sometimes people do have a calling card of the gunslinger or the guy that makes plays in weird ways. Ben Roethlisberger was that type, but he also just made plays out of the pocket. It wasn't mean that he was necessarily, frivolous with the football and just slinging it all over the field. He did at times. I'm not going to say he didn't, but still, the Drake Maye situation with all of these quarterbacks, you go back to last week's podcast, which people can go back and listen. It wasn't time sensitive. You can still hear it and enjoy it. How many of those, what was the percentage from the Athletic Report of the top 10 quarterbacks that don't pan out?
I think it was 41%.
Yeah.
That don't pan out. Yeah.
So, and that's a top 10. That's a top 10. So Drake Maye, he might be one of the 40% that doesn't pan out. And that shouldn't shock us. I guess that's what I'm coming to realize, is that we have all this data and analytics now that show us that it's not a guarantee that a top 10 quarterback is going to be the next great quarterback. So we shouldn't be shocked if they don't, right? I mean, is that accurate? Is that where you're going to?
Shouldn't be shocked at all. You mentioned Ben Roethlisberger. That one of the things that, if I fall back on the point I was just making about managing the quarterbacks, Ben Roethlisberger had that gunslinger mentality, but think about the Steelers in 2004, 2005, early in his career. They were a run-first offense with a great defense, right? Didn't ask him to go out and win games. I think you got to be careful if you're, let's say, the Washington Commanders picking at number 2. Your new offensive coordinator is Cliff Kingsbury. He's an air raid guy. He loves to throw the football. Are you going to bring Drake Maye into that situation and ask him to throw the ball 40 to 50 times a game as a rookie and expose him to hits and expose him to creative coverages? I think, that might be a scary situation and one that could lead to failure for him. So he'll be interesting to watch, depending on where he lands.
It's going to be really interesting to see how many quarterbacks go in that top 10 and see if we can start tallying those up for next year's report. Let's go to our next topic. In the other prospect news, former University of Texas draft defensive tackle Devondre Sweat was arrested Sunday for a DUI. Now, he is considered a late first, early second round prospect. How does this weigh in terms of, I guess we could just not necessarily talk just about Sweat, but anytime there's a situation like this that happens to a prospect prior to the draft, it's going to get a lot of attention. It's going to get a lot of negative attention. I think about last year was Jalen Carter, wasn't it, that had the whole issue with there was a car accident and what happened, and he fled the scene. What's your take on some of this stuff that happens to prospects leading up to the draft?
Seems to happen every year, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I don't think nobody will ever forget Laramie Tunsil.
Laramie Tunsil.
Oh my God. But that caused Laramie Tunsil's draft stock to drop.
Oh, dramatically.
And he's obviously turned into an all-pro player. So it didn't affect him as a player at all. And it's obviously it didn't become an issue with him off the field in his NFL career. I think a lot of it will depend on how T'Vondre Sweat handles it. He's got to obviously show remorse. He's got to say all the right things. If he goes on his top 30 visits, he's got to be able to sort of explain it away as a one-off. I mean, it was 2:00 in the afternoon on a Sunday. That's not exactly prime drinking time,
If you're a day drinker.
I guess, but I mean, if you're a 21-year-old day drinker getting ready for the NFL draft, that's a problem, So
he's a D lineman, man. He doesn't worry about his weight.
It's part of the training. Is that what you're saying? I mean, it's a lapse in judgment, and you have to be able to show, if you're T'Vondre Sweat, that that's all it is, and it's not part of a broader issue. Hopefully, he's getting good advice from whoever his agent is and the people around him. So again, right now it's going to be about how he handles it going forward.
Okay, let's put you in a different. So you just did a great job of like being the advisor for him. Hey, you're going to go to these pre-draft visits. We're going to hit up all the teams you've already met with. You're going to apologize, blah, 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 whatever. I want you to put your GM hat on, your head coach hat on, and you're seeing this, and you had him as a potential target for your team. What's happening in that war room right now? Are you saying, look, it was a lapse in judgment? I think this is a guy that's extremely talented. We can bring him in. We'll work with him. Or are you saying we don't need this headache?
No, I'm definitely not doing the latter, but I'm absolutely making some phone calls.
Yeah.
If this is a guy whose character I hadn't really thought about as being an issue, now that seed's planted in my head, and I'm making phone calls. I'm calling his college coach. Maybe I'm calling his high school coach. I'm calling people around him. Talk to me about this guy. Is this something I should be concerned about? Because if I'm going to spend a first or second round draft pick on him, then I have to make sure that this is a one-off and not part of a broader pattern.
So I'm assuming you've seen the movie Draft Day with Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
So you're pulling the whole his teammates didn't go to his party.
I hate that movie, man.
You hate the movie because it's the Browns, right?
No,
I love the movie.
That rings true.
I love the movie, but it's the Browns, so I can't like the movie that much. But I think that the movie itself, I think there's more truth to that than you think in terms of the amount of digging they try to do into these prospects and stuff like that. There's probably those phone calls happening right now.
Yeah, this is going to sound, I don't know, not arrogant. I don't know how it's going to sound. It's going to sound like I'm being like this condescending coach, but It's hard to appreciate movies about football when like James Van Der Beek is the quarterback and he's clearly never thrown a football in his life, even Keanu Reeves, man, I can't get, Point Break, Bill and Ted, Keanu Reeves all of a sudden now is like quarterbacking the team to a championship. I can't buy it.
Well, Varsity Blues, I don't think was ever going for accuracy in terms of a football movie. That was purely entertainment. But let's go down this rabbit hole. Is there any movie? I know that you've said a couple. What movies would qualify as, okay, that's a football movie, in your opinion?
Well, Burt Reynolds in The Original Longest Yard, because he's a real football player.
Yeah,
he played
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
He was awesome. I love the behind the scenes stuff in Any Given Sunday. Not as much the LL Cool J on the field stuff, but the behind the scenes stuff is good. And there's a really old movie that I guarantee 95% of the people listening to this podcast have not seen, but that was, I thought, pretty brilliant, called North Dallas 40, which was a real hit job on the Cowboys back in the 70s, and starring Nick Nolte. And if you ever get a chance to see it, man, it's awesome. They had real NFL players. They pulled a bunch of the Oakland Raiders, John Matuzak, Lyle Alzado, a bunch of those. They were all in the movie as the teammates. That was excellent. That was really about the ugly business side of the NFL, asking guys to play hurt, take drugs to compensate for injuries, things like that. But that was a really good one.
Okay, so for accuracy's purposes, yay or nay, Remember the Titans?
It's hard to not Remember the Titans just because
I said for accuracy. So did you believe Sunshine could throw a football properly, or do you think that
not really? And I went to Gettysburg College, and he takes he takes the team to Gettysburg. That's not Gettysburg.
That's
That's
not
not even close to
Gettysburg.
Gettysburg.
There's no like tombstones all around in the
No,
woods
no.
at Gettysburg. What about hey, the Friday Night Lights? That I thought that was a great movie. The show was just a drama thing, but the movie I thought was good.
I love the book. The book was phenomenal.
'Cause I never
I
read the
love
book.
excellent book.
You know what I like about the movie? No reading. All right, last one is Necessary Roughness. How accurate was that with Sinbad and Kathy Ireland as the kicker?
I mean, if Kathy Ireland's your kicker, it's not a problem. I don't have any problem with that.
No, you'd love to coach that team. That would be a phenomenal.
Heck yeah.
All right, let's get off that topic. I could talk about football movies all day. Let's go to the last topic. The Bears hosted Marvin Harrison Jr. on an official visit Monday. Any chance Chicago trades out of the number one spot, acquires another high pick, and drafts Harrison, plus a quarterback like J.J. McCarthy, or do you think they're locked in on Caleb Williams?
I think they're locked in, but if I were the Bears, I would really explore that possibility. I think Marvin Harrison might be the most pro-ready player in the entire draft. And I think that if they could move down to 2 or 3 and acquire another top 5, top 6 pick, and then be able to take Harrison, they already have the 9th pick, and maybe they package something where they go Harrison at 2 or 3, and then acquire another pick and get either Daniels or McCarthy. I like Daniels and McCarthy as much as I like Caleb Williams, because I think Caleb Williams has that boom or bust that Drake Maye has. So I would not, if I were the Bears, I would not close the door on some kind of move like that, because I think that they really have the opportunity to bolster their roster at 2 positions rather than just at 1.
The only hesitation that I would have, not for the Bears. The Bears have someone that takes the pick. I think you can trade it. Caleb Williams, I believe, he's only met with the Chicago Bears, I think. I don't think he's even had any pre-draft visits with anyone else. If I'm another team and I'm seeing all this stuff, and he's been very protective of his time, and we talked about the combine, he didn't share any medicals or anything like that, didn't test. If I'm Washington, let's use them as an example. Why would I trade up? And this guy's probably not going to want to come to my team, and he's going to be a headache, and he might pull an Eli Manning. Like, why would I do that? Why would I make that trade? I'm going to force the Bears to make that pick. You make that pick, I'll take the wide receiver. That's just my take. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it may be difficult to find a trade partner because of those reasons. I think if you're locked in on him, though, as the Bears, I think you have to do your due diligence. Maybe there's somebody willing to kind of, give you a Mike Ditka deal. Hey, I'll trade our whole draft for Williams. Probably not, but somebody might be willing to overpay for him. So I think you have to at least make your phone calls.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because they have a lot of picks in the early parts of rounds after their trade with Carolina last year, and it's going to be interesting. I don't think that they trade. Do you think that they trade if you were to predict it?
No,
I don't
nope.
either. I don't either. But I do agree with you that if they were to somehow be able to move back a few picks, get a quarterback, still get Harrison, that would be like a perfect scenario. And that they would be a pretty decent offense if they can get those young players to work out well. But we'll see how that plays out. Let's finish it up with a player profile. Philadelphia Eagles offensive tackle Jordan Mailata. You want to talk
Jordan
about
Mailata? Yeah, it's a great story. I mean, he just signed. He's in the news this week because he signed a 3-year, $66 million extension. Heck of an extension for him. Really awesome background. He was a rugby player. Did you ever see any clips of him playing rugby? Dude is 6'8" and 330 pounds.
That's a big dude.
Trampling through, guys on the rugby. What do they call it? The field, the pitch? I don't know what they call it, but
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just a quick personal story. My son lives in Philadelphia, works for a nonprofit organization called the Philadelphia Children's Alliance. He's a fundraiser. He does fundraising for this group whose focus is on physically and mentally abused children. And the Philadelphia Children's Alliance is Jordan Mailata's charity. And my son had the opportunity a few weeks back to work with him on organizing a fundraiser at the Link in Philly. So Jordan Mailata and my son and some of the other people from the Philadelphia Children's Alliance, along with representatives from the Eagles threw this big fundraiser at the link. It was a phenomenal turnout. They raised a ton of money, and Jordan Mailata could not have been any more gracious, could not have been any better in helping my son with the event. I mean, he just was a great guy. He had his whole family there. And it's just nice to, again, see the personal side of, these, in some instances, literally larger than life individuals. And then you see him get rewarded for his play on the field, man. So he's a good story.
I think it's always great when you hear nothing but negative so much around the league. We talked about these young prospects getting arrested for DUIs and stuff. And like those are the headlines you always see. You don't always get to see or hear about the good stuff that a lot of these players do. That's why when they do the Walter Payton Man of the Year, Cam Hayward obviously won it last year. It's good to really hear about. A lot of these guys do a ton for their communities and for other people. And again, negativity seems to drive the news cycle. We all understand that, but it's good to see that and hear those stories for sure. So kudos to him for the good work he's done, and kudos on the big money deal that he got. That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
The O-linemen are striking it rich these days.
For Philadelphia, especially, Landon Dickerson, I loved what he got with his deal. He wanted a zero-turn mower. He took a picture of himself on a zero-turn lawnmower. I was like, hey, we all want our own things with this money. So there you go.
And the other right, Eagles linemen are at WrestleMania. So, there you go.
That's right. Oh, my gosh. So you took last week off of the call sheet, which I thought was BS. Anyways, I said so on Twitter. What exactly is the plan this week after your hiatus?
I did 50 straight episodes, man. So 50. So I took a week off. I'm ready to do 50 more. Let's go. Right.
There you go.
Man, we're full on in draft mode right now, So I'm going to do a one draft prospect for all 32 teams on this week's show. One guy that I would recommend for all 32 teams, not necessarily a first round guy for all of them, but we're going to pinpoint one prospect for each one of the teams in the league on this week's show.
Cool. That's awesome. That is awesome. Tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
At KT Smith FFSN, and then on the Steel Curtain Network and FFSN YouTube channels doing video breakdowns. Got one up today on SCN on Graham Barton of Duke. Got one of Marvin Harrison Jr. Oh, I'm sorry, I lied. Of Roma Dunze coming later this week.
There you go. Make sure you check those out. If you want to follow me on social media, you can find me at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. Also anchoring the Pittsburgh Steelers coverage on the Steel Curtain Network. Find us wherever you get your podcast by searching Steelers or the Steel Curtain Network. Coach, as always, thank you for your time. We'll talk next week on another NFL Whip Around. Take it easy.